Welcome to Serving Those Who Serve, a show dedicated to the veterans in West Virginia. I'm Billy Wayne Bailey, your host and Deputy Secretary of West Virginia Department of Veterans Assistance. Today I have two special guests joining me to talk about veterans homelessness in West Virginia and some of the things that are being done to eliminate this problem. Later in the show, we will speak with David Michael, Executive Director of the Huntington Area Habitat for Humanity, but first, we're going to spend a few minutes with Marlena Millins, Director of the West Virginia Affordable Housing Trust Fund. Welcome to the show, Marlena.
Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you here. What exactly is the Affordable Trust Fund, Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Well, affordable housing trust funds are created through a public body, typically through legislation, an ordinance, or a resolution that can receive dedicated funding that's used solely for affordable housing. In our particular case, we were actually created in 2001 by the West Virginia legislature to create stronger partnerships and collaboration with private industry that would contribute capital to nonprofit organizations that would in turn provide affordable housing to the citizens in West Virginia.
Okay. So you're not a loaning institution?
We are not a loaning institution. We do not provide direct services. We actually partner with eligible organizations that provide funding to meet the housing needs of those individuals that are 80% and below area median income as determined by HUD.
Okay, so that's poverty level, basically.
Yes, so it's 80% of the poverty level, which is, it differs across West Virginia, as you can imagine.
Right.
The median income in Charleston would be vastly different than the median income in the southern part of West Virginia.
Okay. Now, where does this funding come from?
This funding actually comes from a real estate transfer tax that also includes manufactured housing. In 2008 is when we actually got our dedicated revenue source.
Okay.
And at that time, they also included manufactured housing. Last year, we received about $790,000. 90% of those funds have to go back out across West Virginia for eligible projects to eligible organizations.
You just don't give the money to someone?
No, we do not. We actually have a competitive RFP process, and that we release funds on an annual basis, typically in the fall of every single year. Our money is capped at $150,000 per organization. And as you can imagine, in order to make a difference, that money has to be leveraged with other funding sources. Typically, trust fund money is anywhere from a 4-to-1 match. So for every $1 of trust fund money going into a project, there are 3 other dollars that are coming from other sources. That could be federal, it could be private banking, it could be from volunteers, it could actually be from donations. In order to meet those needs. To give you an example, if you were building a new construction and you were actually paying to construct that, it would actually cost about $150,000. So in order to have the greatest impact, we truly need to leverage our dollars with other sources in order to have the greatest impact.
Okay. And how do veterans fit into this?
Even though the trust fund does not restrict populations that are being served, more times than not, veterans are a population that nonprofit organizations will actually serve. And in particular, the trust fund has actually partnered with nonprofit organizations, most recently with the Huntington Area Habitat. And their proposal, which was received, was for 10 single-family units of housing for low-income veterans in the Huntington area. and that equated to about $10,000 per unit. So you can imagine the other leverage that actually had to come into that project in order for it to actually come to fruition.
What other leverage? Let's talk about that just a
So
little
when
bit.
you talk about leverage, it could be federal funds that actually come from the federal government down to the state of West Virginia through the home program, through CDBG that are entitlement communities. It could be from private banks. It could be from the Federal Home Loan Bank. It could also be from volunteers. Volunteer labor. It could be donated.
So sweat equity is counted towards part of the money.
Absolutely, absolutely. And what our funds do is it enables an organization to reduce the cost to build in order to make it affordable. To give you an example, if it costs $150,000 to build a new unit, and you have a family that can only afford $80,000, you actually have to find subsidy somewhere in order to bring down that cost, in order for that family to afford that home.
Okay.
And our funds are typically at 0%, forgiven over a period of time. And that enables our organizations to provide the affordable housing by bringing down the cost so that our citizens, our low-income citizens, can actually afford those units.
So you loan the money.
We actually loan the money to the organization, and the
Okay.
organization in turn sells that home to a low-income person that actually gets a loan. They could get a loan through USDA. They could get a loan in the case of Habitat. They actually have their mortgage program. They could, the nonprofit organization could actually retain the mortgage, and they could pay them. But every single award is in the form of a 0% forgivable loan to the organization, because that homeowner would not have the ability to repay not only the first, but also the second, which is where our money comes in to bring down that cost.
So if it, like some banks are requiring now 25% down payment. So this would be part of that 25% of the down payment, correct?
Right. So in essence, what an organization could do, say that you were a nonprofit organization and you provided assistance to those individuals that are 80% and below the area median income, you actually applied to the trust fund for down payment assistance.
Okay.
For that 25%. We cap our funding at $150,000 per organization. And if the typical closing costs are anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000, or in the instance of your question, 25%, 25% of $80,000, 25% of $150,000, they could actually use our funds in order to offset those closing costs for that home buyer.
Okay. So now, tell me, how can a veteran take advantage of this program?
In regard, because we don't provide direct services, veterans would need to partner and or obtain services from one of those organizations that actually can participate in the trust fund. And those organizations are local nonprofit housing organizations that are identified as a 501c3 under the IRS guidelines.
Okay.
It could be a regional or a statewide housing organization that has a mission. In their mission, they actually have a housing component. It could be a housing authority, or it could be local government. So in the instance of, let's just say local government, if local government had a veterans initiative where they were offering down payment assistance to veterans, they could actually apply to the trust fund for funding up to $150,000, and if they were selected, they could offer a program to veterans that could offer down payment assistance in order for them to obtain homeownership.
So if there's like a housing development entity of a local government in your area. You could go to them and inquire.
Yeah, or they might have a referral service. Whereas if they had a veteran that came in and needed housing, if there are a lot of times shelters in areas will actually provide services to veterans, and some of the services that they provide is getting them permanent housing, whether that be rental or home ownership. And more times than not, they actually have a relationship with other organizations that can provide those types of services, or they could actually apply directly to the trust fund.
Okay, so but you do not deal with rentals, correct?
We do.
You do?
Yes, we do. Not only as eligible organizations that we previously talked about, the types of eligible projects, when the trust fund was created, they're very broad. And one of the things that we have is flexibility in our funding. And we can do new construction, so that whether that be rental or single family. We can do rehab, we can do acquisition, we can do infrastructure. We can also do housing counseling, closing cost, down payment assistance, and then things that the Trust Fund Act enables us to do, but because of our limited resources, the Trust Fund has really focused on the bricks and mortar in making that difference. We can also assist with capacity building. We can also assist municipalities in planning and those types of things. We have actually partnered with a couple of municipalities, one that was doing a housing study for their entire county. Another municipality that we partnered with, they were actually offering work camps where they had partnered with national nonprofit organizations that actually bring in individuals during the summer. If you've ever heard, they bring in, church groups, and we've partnered with the city of Hurricane because they identified that there were, citizens within their community that needed rehab.
So it's not all new construction.
Right. No,
So
it's not.
A veteran comes home and
Right.
Dad sold the farm, but he's left a little abandoned house over on one side of the lot, and he's got a new house on the other. And son, this is all I can give you to live in, and it needs rehab. You can come in. Your funds can help that veteran rehabilitate that dwelling and make it inhabitable. Correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. What they would need to do is they would need to call either myself at the trust fund or a local nonprofit organization that offers rehab assistance. And if that organization has applied to the trust fund for funding, they could actually utilize those funds. And more times than not, those funds are offered to that homeowner at a 0% forgivable loan as well, because the population that we serve, more times than not, doesn't have the ability to make repayments.
Well, Marlene, we've run out of time, unfortunately. I think we could sit here and probably talk for 3 hours about this and how veterans can get involved. Thank you so much for coming on the show today, and we'll be right back with David Michaels with the Habitat for Humanity. Thank you, Marlene.
Thank you.
Welcome home, man.
Welcome back. We're joined here for our second segment with David Michael, Executive Director of the Huntington Area Habitat for Humanity. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Thanks for being on the show today. And tell us a little bit about the Veterans Housing Initiative that you have undertaken there in the Huntington area.
It's a unique program solely designed for serving the formerly homeless veteran population in our community. We're working through and with the Huntington VA Medical Center's Community Resource and Referral Center. They handle all the case management work, do all the intake. We verify that our veterans who are eligible to participate qualify based on income. They have a desire to be a homeowner because homeownership, quite frankly, is not necessarily for everybody. So we want to provide those opportunities to make sure that those folks that we're working with actually want to be homeowners. We have the similar criteria for our non-veteran population as well as our veteran population. Our program mirrors each other, but we did take some nuances and kind of tailored our program for our Veterans Housing Initiative solely for individual veterans in our community who had been homeless for whatever reason and have made their way into the rental system through the Community Resource and Referral Center, typically are using a HUD-VASH voucher to pay all or part of their housing costs. And then we're taking them one step further and moving those that want to participate in homeownership to a homeownership program. That's
great. I know here the last Veterans Day, we spent the day together putting two homeless veterans into nice little houses there in the city limits of Huntington, and it was very touching, and thank you. I'll say that. And would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
Absolutely.
Kind of take us from the beginning to the end of that program, and it kind of lays out the whole groundwork of how the whole program really works, if you would, please.
Well, as far as the population you're serving, again, is formerly homeless veterans. They have to go through the Community Resource and Referral Center in our community in order to be eligible. That's the first step in the eligibility process. Once we decided the house size, design for the house, they're a one-bedroom, 20 feet wide, 30 feet deep, so there's 600 square feet. We built all of our houses to U.S. EPA Energy Star certification standards, so they're very energy efficient. And we still require sweat equity. We still have homeowner education classes that are required as part of our program, just like any of our normal, typical Habitat homeowners. We broke ground on September the 11th on a very rainy day in Huntington under a tent with a lot of folks that showed up. It was a great event. We decided that at that point, we broke ground on September 11th. We're going to dedicate 2 of those houses on Veterans Day, which was a pretty quick turnaround considering we had those 2 houses under construction. We participated in a World Habitat Day event on the Capitol grounds here in Charleston, and then we also had 3 other houses that were under construction at the same time. So we had a very ambitious September, October, and early November. So we're kind of catching our breath right now. But it was Tuesday's event on November 11th on Veterans Day was a fantastic day. We had a rather large crowd, about 200 or so in attendance. We had a band from Grace Christian School that played the national anthem. Mm-hmm. We had a color guard from Marshall's ROTC program that came over and presented the colors. You were there and participated and spoke. We had folks from the mayor's office. In fact, the mayor, Steve Williams from the city of Huntington, was there. We had the director of the VA hospital that was there, and just several other dignitaries in the crowd. It was quite an event, and we were very pleased and humbled to have partnered with our first 2 veterans, Joe and Carl, and having that go from a rental situation to a home ownership situation was a big step for them, because that was an opportunity that those veterans never thought was possible until this partnership came along.
Yeah, they were 2 older gentlemen,
50s
and 60s?
57 and 61.
Okay, so...
Both Vietnam era veterans.
Yeah.
One served in the Army, one served in the Navy. Both had been homeless for a long period of time prior to arriving and receiving services through the Huntington VA Community Resource and Referral Center. The one was homeless for 33 months. The other was for right at 4 years.
Wow.
And once we were able to get them in a stable housing situation, they were able to receive benefits that they're entitled to through the VA and other forms. They had an address where they could actually receive those benefits at. Once that was established, and then our program kind of came into being, it was presented to them. And our first veteran, his name was Joe. When he was presented, we showed him the house plans for what would be his house eventually. And he stood across from the desk where his case manager was at, and he looked at her and said, I'm ready to do this, and my mom would be so proud.
Oh, that's great.
It was just a tremendous moment, very humbling to be a part of.
Oh, very touching. Well, during the ceremony, I heard a lot about how the land is acquired from the city of Huntington.
Correct.
I think that Mayor Williams has really done a great program there with the way you guys get to acquire that land, and because sometimes the most expensive thing, especially inside a city limits in a large city, in like Huntington, would be acquiring the land to build an affordable house on. Sometimes the house is affordable, but the land it sits on is not so much.
Certainly.
So could you kind of give us a little rundown about how you work with the municipal government down there and the mayor to acquire that land? That's amazing to me.
We actually work through the Huntington Urban Renewal Authority's land bank. It's the first land bank that was created in the state of West Virginia. They acquire properties through sheriff's tax sale, and in return make those properties available to either adjoining property owners to maybe increase the size of their lot, or in this particular instance with us, we've purchased a total of 11 parcels of property from the land bank so far since 2011. The 2 units that we dedicated on Veterans Day for our 2 veterans were 2 of our first 3 lots that we purchased, and we purchased those at a very discounted price, and we paid $500 for each of those 2 lots. The other lot that we had was a little bit more expensive because it was a larger lot. And until we developed this Veterans Housing Initiative and determined the size of the house, that we kind of struggled with that a little bit, but after talking with the Community Resource and Referral Center and the folks at the City of Huntington Planning and Zoning Departments, we all kind of agreed that this was a nice size house. Lots that are smaller, and the particular lots that we're building on are 30 feet wide, and in order to meet the setback requirements from property lines with the City of Huntington zoning codified ordinances, we're required 5 feet minimum from a property line to a structure. So on a 30-foot lot, a 20-foot house fits perfectly.
Right in the middle.
Right in the middle. So we have an opportunity now to use smaller lots that otherwise would have remained vacant or empty. The neighborhood where we're building at right now with our Veterans Housing Initiative, quite literally, when we started, was a jungle. It looked awful. I stumbled across those 2 blocks about 4 years ago and kind of laid claim to them and said, if we have any opportunity to purchase these properties, then that's what we're going to do, and it'll be kind of Huntington Area Habitat's blank canvas to do something with. And then lo and behold, here comes our Veterans Housing Initiative, and it worked out. It wasn't our first location. It was actually our second location. Our first location didn't work out real well, so we kind of stepped back and retooled, and it took us about a month to develop a plan of action for utilizing those smaller lots in that neighborhood.
Well, you've done a great job. I know it really added a lot to those neighborhoods. I was there and walked down the streets. Another question, David, we need to answer is, if I'm a veteran watching this, how can I get a hold of what's the steps I need to take to become a recipient of one of these dwellings and, share in this?
Well, for our particular program, that folks need to keep in mind, it serves Cabell County. And in particular, we also have the opportunity to serve Lawrence County, Ohio, but that's, of course, a different state. But it's still in the catchment area of the Huntington VA Medical Center, right. And it's still in our service area that we have. More particular for veterans in West Virginia, the opportunity would come through working with the Community Resource and Referral Center in Huntington.
So the VA.
That is how we've designed our program. Other parts of the state may have done something or may be looking at doing something differently. They may be looking at even serving, we have an opportunity to serve veterans' families, not just individual veterans, but we've designed our program specifically to address formerly homeless individuals. and provide that homeownership opportunity for them. The house was designed for a non-family. I don't want to call an individual not a family, but
Right.
no
A
children,
single, right.
just an individual. It's designed to be very efficient as far as the size goes, as far as the flow from the front door to the bedroom, the way the house is, the interior is laid out. So it's tailored for that specific population. We have a couple who are veterans that are currently or going through services with the Community Resource and Referral Center. They're interested in that exact same size house that we're rolling out for our individual veterans. However, that would actually take a policy change on our organization's behalf in order to accommodate that married couple.
Okay.
Not saying we can't, but I think we'll certainly look at that as we head down to look at the future.
Well, if a veteran comes home and he has a family, say a wife and maybe 2 children or 1 child, you're not stuck on that little cottage-size house for a veteran. I mean, you would pick a house that would more accommodate
Correct.
A larger family.
Correct. Depending on the size of the family.
Okay.
Is how we size the house.
So
for any
family of
Habitat
1
family.
to a family, whatever, the more the
We have
different.
actually constructed a 5-bedroom house.
Wow.
It was for a family of 7, mom, dad, married couple with 5 children, all of which were under the age of 14.
I can't say anything. That's what mine are.
It was a really neat situation how it worked out for everybody involved. It was the first house in our subdivision that we were constructing in Huntington, and it worked out really well. It's our largest house that we've constructed to date, and their monthly payment to us was it is $150 less than what they were paying in rent.
Wow. Wow. Well, you know, probably your most famous volunteer for Habitat for Humanity is President Carter.
Correct.
And I've always admired him for his humanity in Habitat for Humanity, and he leaves a good example for many of us. Yes. to take on. And you know, I'd like to say something to our veterans. If you're a veteran out there and you really want to help a veteran, get a hold of David here and help a veteran do a little sweat equity. You know, go and drive a few nails or saw a few 2x4s in 2. I'm not very good with a square or a plumb bob.
That's okay.
But